Thanks, Charlie. It's absolutely an honor to be here. And first, congratulations to you and the CogX team for putting together such an impressive festival. It's almost a veritable feast of AI, and not only that, a global virtual feast of AI. The theme of this conference is how do we get the next 10 years right? And a key driver of that will be understanding the transformational AI companies that will be impacting all of our aspects of our lives tomorrow. And who better to help us shed light on that are the venture capitalists who are investing in the young AI companies today that will become the household names of tomorrow. So it's really my pleasure to welcome an all-star panel of venture capitalists who are funding the best AI startups globally. So I'd like to introduce the panelists. First, would like to introduce Irina Haivas, who is partner at Atomico. And for those of you who don't know Atomico, they're a leading European venture capital firm founded by the co-founder of Skype. And for those of you who don't know Irina, before joining Atomico, her impressive track record includes being a surgeon. And next, all the way from Shanghai, we have James Chou, who is the CEO of Microsoft for Startups North Asia. And he's focusing on scaling up innovative tech and AI companies in China, Japan, and South Korea. And from London, delighted to have us joined by Andrei, who is a partner at Accel. And for those of you who don't know Accel is really a US mega VC who have invested in probably a few names that you know of: Facebook, Deliveroo, Spotify, and Kayak. And finally, from Boston, I'm delighted to have the pleasure of introducing Rob May, who is general partner at PJC. And Rob really first came to my attention as probably the most experienced AI angel investor in the planet. I think to date, Rob has over 70 angel investments in AI startup companies. So we only have a scant 30 minutes to scratch the surface here. So please enter any of your questions in the Q&A, and we will attempt to answer them in the breakout sessions that follow. But without further ado, I'd like to turn to Andrei to kick us off. And Andrei, what types of young AI companies are you investing in today? And are you focused on any particular stage, sector, business model, or technology? And can you highlight a couple of those companies that you're invested in?
Sure. So first of all, we've been very keen on backing AI startups that solve a very strong business problem. So UiPath has been a case of that. They're a leader in RPA and enable large enterprises to make their processes more efficient by automating repetitive workflows. An earlier stage company we've backed is Raza, and they're underpinning another strong trend we're behind in terms of building AI tools for developers who have a stronger and stronger voice in organizations. And Roche are building the leading conversational AI platform.
Gotcha. So it's really focused on what B2B sort of enterprise applied AI, is it?
That's correct.
And turning to you, Irina, could you answer the same?
Sure. So we've also been active in the AI space for a while now. In fact, about 30% of our investments have been in companies that are kind of these AI first or AI driven. Our interest has been twofold, both on the applied AI front. We've backed companies like Chiron, which is using AI for medical imaging, Spacemaker, building tools for urban planning and architects. But also we've been investing in AI infrastructure, with one more of the more notable examples being GraphCore, which is a next generation chip focused on enabling some of the AI use cases. And so going forward, we see opportunities in both of these areas as the AI kind of pushes into these old industries and into kind of new use cases. And as Andrei said, we also see opportunities in the AI stack, which is continuously evolving, and we're looking at the next wave of tools for AI and data science.
Great. Now, jumping to Shanghai, and James, what is your Microsoft investment in incubator looking at?
Yeah, so for us, we are very focused on B2B. The AI companies solving vertical B2B problems, but of course, China is a huge market. The B2C market is very huge. So any companies that apply technologies, AI technologies for consumer business model innovation, we also look at those.
Gotcha. And then Rob, you've had a veritable treasure chest of investments over the years in AI. What's your particular thesis?
as an angel investor, before I joined PJC last year, I was really focused on chips and infrastructure. So I did 3 AI chips. There's a lot of problems. GPUs are awesome, but there's actually a lot of problems with GPUs at scale. And so a lot of these AI models are going to need, neuromorphic chips and analog chips. And there's a lot of old technology that's coming back around and is able to be applied now. So that's pretty exciting. Since joining PJC, we've been pretty thesis driven around things where AI can change business models. So for example, you've heard for years about, software as a service. We sort of have a thesis that we call services as software, which is, you take a workflow that's done largely by humans. Maybe you keep the human interface in place, but you try to strip out and automate everything that's behind the human with algorithms, or if it's a more physical workflow with robots. So a conceptual example might be think of a restaurant where you still have waiters and waitresses, but all the food prep and everything would be done by robots. And now think of a digital version of that. So an example of an investment there that I'm in is BotKeeper, which is a bookkeeping robot. You email Susie at BotKeeper and you don't know if it's a human or algorithm, and it takes care of all your finances. And it's been a pretty interesting model. What we're really focused on right now at PJC, I have a pretty strong thesis around synthetic data. And so the idea is, like, let's say that you have you're using a machine learning model to unlock your phone with your face. And the problem is you get a report that it doesn't work well in certain situations, like maybe in the rain or maybe in dark lighting in a bar or whatever. Well, instead of going out and getting thousands and thousands of new pictures of people in those situations, you can take the pictures you have and you can tweak the lighting synthetically in Photoshop or some, kind of tool that's like that. And you can use your real data to create synthetic data to augment your data set. And so I think we did a deal with a company called synthesis.ai that's in that space that we're very excited about.
Great. And the whole top, we won't have time to cover it today, but the whole question of synthetic data, with data being really the oil to drive the AI engine in the context of regulatory environment and privacy, synthetic data is a big and important topic for it. So turning a little bit to one of the beautiful things about being a venture capitalist is you have really a unique vantage point. You get to see thousands of companies on an annual basis and really get to cherry pick the best of those. So in your experience, having looked at hundreds, if not thousands of companies, what is it that you look for in the companies that you decide to invest in? And is there anything about you've really learned about investing in AI companies that are different from investing in other companies that you've seen? So I don't know who would like to start that. Rob, do you want to go?
Sure. I'll just tell you, I think one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of AI companies sort of look like services companies initially, because sometimes they have these human in the loop models where they're labeling or collecting data. And so their margins don't look like software margins. And that becomes a problem, because we've become so used to these sort of 80+% SaaS margins that are really, really nice for a business model. And so one of the things that we're always trying to figure out is this an example of a company, how long are they going to be stuck with these services margins, or are they going to move into a model where they're automating more and more of the work and it looks more like software margins? And we're trying to figure out if the team understands that and has a clear path to make that, and how long it's going to take, because that's going to affect how much capital they need, and everything else is an important point of discussion in our partnership meetings.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point you bring up. I think everyone would naturally assume in investing in AI companies, it would be like investing in software companies with really 90% plus margins. But what you're saying is that there is a large services component behind it, so the margins are lower. And I think that takes a lot of people by surprise. Irina, would you like to add anything to?
I mean, I think I would second that in terms of kind of, if you look at some of the AI companies we invested in, they're almost like this new type of business, which has elements of both software, but also elements of the kind of end industry they're tackling. And so the way I think about it is not necessarily AI as a means, it's a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. And starting with what's the problem you're trying to solve, and what is kind of that pain point, and why is that piece of AI and that team and that product that you're building really the right one to deliver against that and translate into that tech into a product that the industry needs is where I start from. Because data and algorithms can provide some interesting competitive advantage at the beginning, but they can also commoditize over the long term, and you're kind of back to business basis of, build a product that customers need and love. So that's one where I start from. And then there's areas, as Rob mentioned, around scalability and understanding the business model in the kind of end industry and what that means for monetization for the particular company that I also look at.
Gotcha. Andrei, you talked about one of your investments is UiPath, which is robotic process automation. And that's really replicating a lot of the data entry and manual processes that go on in organizations. But when you looked at UiPath, what was it about that company, heavily AI driven, that made you decide to invest in that?
Yeah, for sure. And I would love to build on Irina's point here. I think a key aspect we look for in AI businesses is defensibility, and especially as many algorithms have become open sourced, readily available, it's very hard to get that edge through algorithms alone. And oftentimes that comes through either better workflow, such as the ones UiPath provides, a data moat. The more data you process, especially if you're in a specific industry, the more edge you have over any competitor. Or with the developer community. And that's also something UiPath has done very well by building a community of tens of thousands of engineers and RPA developers who are embracing UiPath as a standard in RPA.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that's being said widely is there's sort of a talent war going on for the best AI engineers. So how are your young companies able to attract them compared to, say, the big technology companies with their six-figure salaries?
I can answer that, because one of the way we manage to attract some of those is by is in these more mission-driven companies. So some of the companies I invested in are in the life sciences and healthcare space, and they generally, a lot of the people that join there have a personal mission affiliated with a company, and they would prefer to put their talents towards that. So that's something that can be used. And the other one is obviously the degree of impact that an engineer can have on actually building the tech and building the product.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I would add on that front is the rise of open source. I think we've seen that a lot happen, especially in AI. And I think it's very beneficial to allow parts of your product to be built by the outside world. And this provides you a very strong funnel of potential developers and data scientists who could join your company full time.
Yeah, and as an aside, I mean, I think it's surprising for a lot of people, the volume of the AI algorithms and frameworks and models that the big tech companies have actually put into source. So Microsoft's, the Googles, the Facebooks, all of them have actually put some of their leading AI frameworks out there and available to the public for free. And turning to James in Shanghai again, what is it you look for, James, in the companies that you invest in incubate?
I think like the team is very important. As a couple of guys mentioned, the talent. So how do you attract the people? We tend to find a lot of scientists, the data scientists who used to work in US, got their PhDs from MIT, CMUs, returned to China to found their companies, and then the VCs really want to pour in money to them. I think a lot of times, given they used to go to school at the MIT or CMU, they sometimes just find their classmates work together with them, and then they also can attract a lot of talents through that way. So talents definitely is a one, because it's early stage companies. The team is really make the difference. And the other things that we're really looking for is whether that business model really can scale. Because in China, a lot of times they just start to build a product more like a project, or not really build a product to scale. So that's also very important to us.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about the importance of data in the context of when you're looking to invest in AI companies? Is that important to you as a differentiation? James?
That's not so important to us right now, because China, there's a lot of data available right now. So we don't really really consider data is a major fact for us to consider invest or help them to scale up.
Gotcha. Well, we will come back to that question of some of the characteristics of China. So we sort of touched upon this, but it's, if I look at London, there's over 1,000 AI startups alone. And in some ways, it's easy to start a company and brave. But the trick is really how do you grow and scale these companies into the future unicorns that will have an impact on the world. And we've slightly touched upon it. But what have you learned through your experience in terms of the key success factors and the challenges in being able to turn it and grow into a large AI company?
Sure. So I would say it first starts with the founding team, where London has an incredible array of founders from technical universities, but sometimes they may lack that commercial founder as well. So I think having balanced team who have both technical leadership as well as commercial DNA would be very important. The other thing is looking at companies who build a product beyond the tech. I think we've seen a lot of companies pushing the very edge of the technologies they're developing or the algorithms they're developing, but without a fine understanding of what the customer need is and what the market requires. It's very hard to kind of go to the very end of the potential of what you're building and actually build a large business from it.
Yeah, very important point. I mean, a lot of the AI startups are very much focused on B2B, so selling to enterprises, software and products and platforms. And so making sure that the AI startup not only has very good technical scientific founders, but they also have commercial experience selling. And it's also a very long sales cycle, often into the enterprise. It can take sometimes 12 months to actually close and another year to actually go from proof of concept to scale. Who else would like to offer some thoughts? Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I actually want to build on something that Andrei said in an earlier question in response to that, which is I think when you're thinking about scale for these companies, he mentioned that they look for defensibility, and I think you have to have defensibility in your company to be able to scale and take a large part of the market for something like that. So we look for that a lot, and it's hard because in the early days when you have these emerging technology stacks and you're not sure exactly what they're going to look like, and you have these emerging markets and the use cases are kind of being determined, like it's not always clear if there's going to be defensibility or what it might be. So a lot of it is projecting forward to, well, what does this market look like in 5, 6, 7 years, and how and how can a company position itself to be in a very defensible position along that path as the market gets to that place. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that and talking to the founders to see if they understand that, or if they're just like, you have to be careful if they're just sort of like, hey, this is just a really cool product and we like working on it. That may not be the best investment.
And what are some of the sort of defensibilities you look like? Is it the team? Is it the IP? Is it the data? Is it a network effect?
It's a lot of that. I mean, for us, we look a lot at, I like companies that are doing AI, but are thinking about it from the perspective of what businesses need and integrating with existing workflows as much as possible. Things like that. There are founders sometimes that are just so impressive and so unique in how they think about the world that you feel like that founder is the magic sauce and will figure out, all kinds of things that other people won't understand. Sometimes it can be data, but often it can't be. There's a lot of different things.
Irina, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to your point around kind of building AI companies, I think one thing is keeping the use case or the problem set contained, because a lot of these AI tools and teams could solve so much or could do so much with it, but you have to start somewhere. And if you start going too much towards edge cases or going too much towards the intended application, that comes with new data challenges. You need new data. You expand the kind of like possible solution space, and the implementation becomes harder. So I think that would be one. The other thing is the AI readiness of the customers themselves. What I've seen of sometimes is, to Rob's point earlier around service, that comes not only because you still need the human in the loop for the kind of AI scaling itself, but actually also because the readiness is not there on the customer side. So understanding and picking those customers that have either teams that can ingest that solution that you're building is also important.
It's a really interesting point you make. I mean, if you read the media narrative, you'd assume that every company in the world is doing AI at scale. But if you actually look more deeply into this, there's something of an experimentation and often data science projects going on in the enterprise, and they're hidden away in a silo, but they never actually scale up. So the adoption levels on AI, the number of companies that actually have AI at scale is a lot less than perhaps suggested. I've heard 5, 10, 15% versus 80% that others have used. So there is a challenge around the readiness. James, anything to add to that? What are you seeing in terms of success in China and being able to scale up your companies?
I think one of the things you mentioned about the technology and the commercial part, I think having a good product manager in China is pretty important, because China, only large enterprises willing to pay. Times you just have the temptation to build a customized project for customers, but sometimes you forgot you really need to build a product to scale. I think to having someone, especially you solving a B2B problem, you need to have some domain expertise, knowing the customer pain, and a guy really can extract from a project to build a product is very important in China, particularly in this market.
Got you. And shifting gears slightly and staying with James here, one of the things I do is I sit on the World Economic Forum's Global AI Council that's chaired by Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, and he wrote an interesting book from a sort of Anglo-American perspective called The AI Superpowers. And one of the things he talked about, that China is in a very strong position to grow AI companies for really a number of reasons: structural, regulatory, cultural reasons. And with a population of 1.4 billion, and James said earlier, that there's a huge amount of data that Chinese has to fuel their AI. So, James, you travel the world. I met you in Belgium or in Luxembourg last year. Could you comment on how you see how AI differs in China from perhaps your travels around the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think China is, especially Chinese entrepreneur, is extremely very good at the speed and the scale, because as you mentioned, we have the data, the venture capital available in China also makes them really can think big and do things probably some other countries cannot do. But I think the things really they are not so good at is the basic research. I think from the Western countries, still a few years ahead, especially like in the US, maybe in certain areas 2 or 3 years ahead of China on that in that areas.
And what about, we chatted before, the software enterprise market in China? Large companies are putting in place enterprise software. What about smaller businesses, SMEs? Is there an opportunity around AI-powered enterprise software there?
Yeah, so China, that's very interesting questions, because China have a huge base at small SMEs, but the lifespan of those SMEs is really maybe 2 or 3 years. We're talking about large enterprise, and nowadays they're just going to the digital transformation. So SMEs, they never go digital, and they never even think about buying software product. So that's kind of like a challenge I mentioned before. For startups, they really need to build a product to scale, so they don't have to be always customize their product for large enterprise. But that's only the large enterprise willing to pay, and the small, medium-sized companies don't really realize that. But this kind of things is start to changing. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, I see there's opportunities for China to innovate in that area.
Gotcha. And turning back to the panel, we're quite short on time, but any comments from Rob, how you see AI different in the US versus your travels perhaps to Europe?
I've been talking to a lot of my friends about this. I go to China maybe once every other year, so I don't spend a lot of time there. But a lot of friends that I have that spend a lot of time there, we've really debated sort of the sociological differences between the countries, right? One of the great things about Silicon Valley is this culture of failure and everything else. And And I think in traditional Chinese culture, from what I understand, maybe that's not celebrated as much. And so some people believe there's a little more pressure that if you make a bad investment and you take a wrong path in an AI technology, it may be harder to reverse. And so if you assume that this is like a lot of other technologies, is going to require rapid iteration, lots of failure, and all that kind of stuff, the US could still have an edge.
Gotcha. And then Irina or Andrei, when you look to on your travels, how do you see sort of Europe compare to other continents in terms of AI?
I guess on my side, what I would add is that, especially in technical domains, most of the companies we back tend to be remote first, if not remote friendly. So I think as we go forward, I think these lines between China, US, Europe will be blurring more and more.
Okay. All right. Well, we're just about to wrap up here. So I'm going to ask the panelists in one sentence or thereabouts, could you tell the audience what AI-powered frontier technologies will they be hearing about in a few years' time that they don't hear today? So starting with Irina.
My view is future opportunities will come from combining AI with emerging platforms, with two examples that I would put out there. One is AI and quantum computing that addresses these high-scale optimization barriers we have today. And the other one that I'm particularly excited about is combining AI and engineering more broadly with biology, which I see as kind of the next big platform, and AI a key tool to unlocking its potential.
That's great. Thank you. Andrei.
Yeah, on my side, I'm very focused on opportunities with commercial impact in the next 5 years. And I think voice is a very exciting area.
Voice, fantastic. Rob?
I would say synthetic media, right? I think if you have followed what's happened with deepfakes and you think about good applications to, of that to, news and video creation and, how-to videos for companies, I think there's going to be a lot that's going to happen there.
Fantastic. And then James, finally for you in Shanghai, what do you expect to see in the coming years?
I think 5G and IoT in combination with AI will be big in coming years. You can think about the intelligent connectivity and whether it's used in transportation, logistics, or industrial 4.0 manufacturing.
Fantastic. Well, we're just on the half an hour, so perfect timing. I would really like to thank this panel. I could spend so much more time here, but we will be cut off very shortly. So thank you very much. And over to Charlie.
Yes, Simon, thank you. A big thank you to the whole panel, to Irina, to James, to Rob, Andrei. That was an absolutely fantastic session. And please, to the audience, don't miss the opportunity in the breakout Q&A to ask your questions. If you go to the CogX app, you can ask questions there. You need to look for the breakout Q&A for this session, either in Happening Now or under the track filter that says Breakouts. So that brings this session to a close on the leadership stage, CogX 2020. Bye for now.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.